In today's lesson, we are going to run through the Meadow Simulation Lab. First, we're going to identify the producers, herbivores, and carnivores in our ecosystem. Then we are going to look at the initial biomass of those three organisms, and we're going to run the simulation, and it's going to run for about 99 to 100 years, and then it's going to show us the changes in the biomass of those different organisms after that time period. The biomass refers to how much carbon, the mass of carbon in each of those organisms. So the amount of carbon that's in the producers or the plants, the amount of carbon that's in the herbivores, and the amount of carbon that's in the carnivores. The amount of carbon is an indication of how much energy, right? Carbon is in glucose, our molecule of energy. And that is going to be a representation of how much energy is in these different organisms. So we're going to run this a bunch of different times. You're going to run this a bunch of different times. And you are going to look at the beginning and ending biomass. To return back to the simulation after you've run one, you're going to click the menu button on the side of the stopwatch, and I'll show you that in a minute. You're going to run this several times, changing the beginning conditions. At this point, though, to start out with, you should not decrease or increase any of the components all the way down to 0 or all the way to 1000. Okay, so you can change everything else, and you can change all three of them at once. You can change one, and you're going to make notes on the differences and similarities. There are some questions that you're going to answer at the end. And then after you've run it a few times, then you can start playing around. After you do all 10 of them, you can change some of the components down to 0 or all the way to 1000, but you're not going to get very accurate results when you do that. So if we look at this chart here, this is where we're going to record our data. So we're going to put our initial biomass. And for the first one, I'm going to start out with all of them at 500. And then we're going to record what the ending biomass is after we run our simulation. So let me go to a sample here of our simulation. So when you go to the website, this is what it looks like. So we have grass, rabbits, and foxes. So first you have to figure out which is which. What's the producer, what's the herbivore, and what's the carnivore in this particular simulation. Okay, to change this, you can simply just slide these, or you can click in the box here and type in a specific number. Okay, so you have a couple options for that. So for the first one, let's leave everything exactly the same, and we're going to hit the start button. And then it's going to run through this simulation for us. It's going to show the plants, the rabbits, and the foxes and their relative numbers. It's over time, so you can see the years passing. And we started out with all of them equal. And then in the end, after the 100-year or 99-year time frame, our foxes, right, the foxes are the orange here, have gone from a biomass of 500 at time 0 to a biomass of 9 after 99 years. The rabbit started out as 500 and they ended up at 90. And then the grass started out at 500 and ended up at 920. So I'm going to go back to our document here. The carnivores were 9. The herbivores were 90. And the producers were 920. Okay, so you're going to record whatever data you get here. You can look at the graph too. The graph actually gives you some interesting information. If we go back to time 0, they're all equal bars, and then you can watch that actually change over time as you run the simulation. And then this graph also gives a variety of information here. You can see they all started out the same. Our green biomass really increased, and then it kind of leveled out. The brown, which is the rabbits, went way down at first, and then kind of recovered a little bit. And then our foxes, the orange, just went down and down and down and stayed pretty low down there. It's flashing because you can click on any time frame, and it will tell you over here what those numbers were. So you can move this around and look at different values. If you're curious, we are really, so you can see when it actually all started to level out and get pretty close to what it was going to end up being. was somewhere around 60, 70 years here. You can see when the numbers were really different, but we're really just recording time 0 and time 99 in our chart. So after you've looked at that, you're going to click this button right over here on our stopwatch to go back to the menu, and then you can try different numbers here. So I'm going to put the foxes up to about 750, and I'm going to leave the other two as they are, and I'm going to run the simulation again. So I'm actually going to change this to 750, 500, and 500. So let's see what happens there. You can see the graph here changing drastically as time goes on. And surprisingly, we've ended up with pretty similar results here, right? We have pretty similar numbers. So I'm going to go back to my data table, and I'm going to show that I started out with 750 for the biomass of the carnivores, and then 500 for my other two, and I ended up with the same ending numbers, right? So you're going to run through a bunch of these simulations and fill in your own chart. See, after a while, I would say the first 5 trials here, don't change anything to either 0 or 1000. You can get pretty close to it. You know, maybe try 10, maybe try 990 for some of the numbers. Change all of them to be high, change all of them to be low, just change one to be high and the other two low. I play around with these in that simulation. You're going to do 10 trials total. And then after that, there are some questions that you are going to answer. And you're going to look for patterns, and you are going to look for some similarities and differences. And then I'm also going to explain the calculation here. So for numbers 2 and 3, you have to do a calculation of the percentage of the biomass that is transferred to the level above producers. So you're going to take whatever number, this is for number 2, whatever number you got for the herbivores for the final, you're going to divide it by whatever number you got for the producers in your final biomass, and you're going to multiply that by 100, and that's going to give you the percentage of biomass that was transferred. And then for number 3, you're going to repeat that, except this time you're going to use the number that you got for the carnivores divided by the number that you got for the herbivores, because we're looking between those two levels this time. Again, multiply by 100, and that's going to give you the percentage for number 3. Okay, the percentage of biomass that is transferred to the level above the herbivores. So from the herbivores to carnivores, this is the percentage that you're going to get. And then go through the rest of the questions the best that you can and really try and put the pieces together of this puzzle. Okay, so that's the Meadows Lab simulation. Okay, you're going to keep running through different ones. Click on this menu button to go back to where you were before to run the simulation again. Change your numbers around and see what happens. Okay, make some observations, look at similarities and differences, and then answer the questions.